Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Torah class on the topic of meditation and prayer as we talk about the grace after meals, the benching. Biblical mitzvah, it's a biblical commandment to say the grace after meals, to bench. And our goal in this course, as we do it on Thursday mornings, is to be able to build a sense of familiarity with the benching, the grace after meals in the original Hebrew, to the point that we will be able to have a proper understanding of it, in not only in the context of grace after meals of benching, but also within the wider context of all of Hebrew and all of our prayers, even to the extent of conversational Hebrew, because Hebrew is a very logical construct where it's not just randomly appointed by social consensus. They actually mean something, and every word has a root which is expressed in the most interesting of places when ideologically the concepts are related. And that's what this course is about. As we embark on this course, we're starting today the 35th in this series, where we have so far managed to successfully build, I believe it was 46 words into our Hebrew word diary. 46 words already in our Hebrew word diaries. And today we're starting word number 47. Our goal in this course is to reach up to 100 words so that we can become so familiar with the Hebrew language. We'll know 100 words that you're familiar with. And therefore, it's not going to be any more like a language that is foreign to you, like a Latin or an ancient Greek. It's going to be something which you're familiar with. You'll know 100 words. So far, you'll know 47 words in Hebrew. You'll know how to read them. You'll understand their meaning. And in some cases, we might even be able to go a little bit deeper and understand a meditation associated with those words. So I'd like to welcome to our classroom today, Rob Berger from Chicago, Marty Knob from New York, Ed Hockman from Palm Beach Gardens, and Elaine from Ibis. These are the people that I see. Everyone else who's with us live and later, I'd like to say shalom. Remember, our daily daily davening is already happening. So we already have daily services here at 7:30 a.m. and we're slowly rebuilding our minyan after the challenges of the heavy quarantine that we all had. We're all wearing masks in the shul and 6-foot distancing. We're observing the protocols. And if anybody is able to join us here in shul in the weekdays at 7:30 a.m., Sundays 9 a.m., and Shabbat mornings at 9:30 a.m., we would be delighted to have you as we rebuild our minyan. Even though our services are also streamed online on Zoom simultaneous to the daily minyan. So whereas our out-of-towners join us online, those in-towners, we ask you if you could join us in person. That'll be lovely. Let's go back and start this course. I just want to remind you that if you have some extra time on your hands, I encourage you to review the 46 words of our Hebrew word diaries. They're all listed at jewishgardens.com/spiritual. That's jewishgardens.com/spiritual, where you can find all of these classes. The first 35 classes of this course, nice and neatly laid out for you to be able to review while you're exercising, while you're working, whatever you might be doing, so that you can catch them up and review and reflect on them to the point that you'll be able to properly understand them. You know, you'll really be able to understand 47 Hebrew words. It's quite an achievement to be able to take on a new language, Hebrew language. Remember, Hebrew is the only language in the history of the world that was resuscitated from officially being declared dead. It was 1919, I think it was, where it was officially declared as a vibrant and official language of the state of the land of Israel. And with that, let's go into this right now. Remember, the way we do this is that we take a word, we identify its root, and we write the root on an index card. The 3 letters of the Hebrew root on the one side of the index card, and on the back side you write that translation, and in parentheses you can write a deeper meaning in English, so that when you have now 47 cards, you simply go through them on a regular basis, before breakfast, after breakfast, before you take a walk, while you're waiting for your husband, before you go to sleep. You do it multiple times a day, and slowly but surely they're going to sink in. You go through it over and over and over again. They will slowly but surely sink in, and you'll notice that you are actually recognizing these words. It's a beautiful experience, and it's a very beautiful way to take upon yourself a new language. This is how I learned Yiddish. My parents didn't want us to know Yiddish. They spoke Yiddish when they did not want us to understand. But when I realized that the Rebbe's teachings were primarily in Yiddish, I had no choice at 15 or 16 years old to take this on, and I learned Yiddish this way, and till today I'm able to speak Yiddish because of the index card method. And that's why I'm encouraging you to do the same, but with the index card. So today we're learning in the Hebrew prayer book. We're on page 90 in the Hebrew prayer book. If you happen to have the book in front of you, that's great. If you don't, I'm going to post a copy of the book into the comments right now, and you'll see it in the comments box. We're on page 90. You can just turn to that page in the link that I just posted. I'm going to post it to Facebook and to YouTube right now, so you'll be able to see it over there. And if you turn to page 90, you'll see it in the Hebrew and in the English. Now, okay, so hopefully that worked. Now, you'll notice this over here is what the prayer book looks like, right? So when we daven, we typically daven in the Hebrew, but you can daven in English, right? The mitzvah of davening is that you should understand it, and therefore you can daven in English. However, it's on the left side of the page. If you're able to daven in Hebrew, Hebrew is the language which goes directly to heaven. The other languages need to be translated or transmitted via the conduit of the angels, and therefore if you want a prayer to go direct to heaven, if you want no intermediaries, you want it to be able to go to heaven, you want to daven by direct, and that would be davening in Hebrew. So there's a tremendous advantage of davening in Hebrew, and besides, not much of Hebrew you cannot really translate, so without losing the soul of the language, and that's why it's really important to daven, if at all possible, to daven in Hebrew. So today's word number 47 is noten. It's at it's the last word on the second line on page 90. Again, it's a biblical mitzvah to do the grace after meals right here, right? Biblical mitzvah to do the grace after meals, and that's on page 90 after you eat bread. And I'm pointing right now to the word that we're doing today. The word is nosen. Nun, taf, nun is the root of this word. I'm actually going to show you that right now. The root of the word right here is 3 letters, which is really 2. You'll see the nun. The nun on the screen right now is the first letter of the 3-letter root. The nun is a letter which is different to the letter which is 2 letters above it on the screen right now. See, 2 letters above it is the gimel. The gimel has a heel. It's very glamorous. The glamorous is for gimel, but the nun has a flat heel. It's a flat shoe, and it's less glamorous. It's just normal, and that's why we call it normal for nun. Nun is normal. Now remember, when that nun goes to the end of a word, it becomes a final letter. Just like in English, capital letters are at the beginning of a sentence. In Hebrew, there's no such thing as a capital letter, but there is such a thing as a final letter. The final letters change form, just like in English letters change form, but not at the beginning of a sentence, only at the end of a word. And it's only 5 letters that change format. One of those 5 letters that change format is the nun. Like you see it over here, the nun kicks its leg down beneath the line. It becomes a long nun when it's at the end of a word. So that this letter natan, this word natan, starts with a nun and ends with a nun. But the nun at the end of the word is a final nun, and that's why it changes form just a little bit. Now, the middle letter over here is also on the screen. Is the letter taf. The letter taf or saf. It's the final letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and that's got a toe sticking out. You see that toe sticking out of its little chuppah. If it was just a chuppah, a square chuppah, then it would be a ches. Right? That letter is up over here. That's the letter ches. If it was just a square chuppah, it would become a ches. Chuppah for ches. But if it's got a toe at the end, then it becomes a taf. It's the final letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Remember, if it has a dot inside, then it's a taf. If it has no dot, then it becomes a saf. Taf and saf, just like bet and vet or kaf and chaf, the taf and the saf changes the form if it has a dot in the letter. So again, a dot in the letter makes it a taf. No dot in the letter makes it a saf. So now let's understand. Now that we understand the root of the word is natan. Just like the English name Nathan, like Nate or Nathan, or the owner of Macy's, the former owner of Macy's was Nathan Strauss, right? Nathan is this Hebrew word. Nathan means Natan, or Nathaniel, right? Is Nathan, the root is Natan. So when we do the grace after meals, we say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hazan et haolam kulo b'tuvo. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who in his goodness provides sustenance for the entire world, b'chein, with grace, b'chesed, with kindness, u'v'rachamim, and with mercy. And now we start the next phrase of the grace after meals. Hu notein lechem l'chol basar ki le'olam chasto. He gives food to all flesh, for his kindness is everlasting. Now, you'll notice that many of the words that we're encountering now, we've already learned in our 47 words of our Hebrew word diary. For example, the word hu, he, is a word that we've already learned in our Hebrew word diary. Hu means he, right? Lechem is another word, bread, which we've learned in our Hebrew word diary. Lechol is another word. Chol means all. So in this case, he gives bread to all flesh. These are words that we've already learned, not the word flesh. We've not learned the word flesh, meat, basar. That's going to be our next word. But for right now, what we're starting to realize is that if you've done your homework and if you're able to review your Hebrew word diaries, you'll notice that what we learned in a previous lesson will by now be engraved in your mind to be able to say, oh, this word chol or kol, I know what that means. It means all. Or lechem means bread. It's all a matter of review. It's all about in the review, and it's not too late to start it right now. If you just go to jewishgardens.com/spiritual, again, jewishgardens.com/spiritual, and you'll be able to review the classes. I think we have 27 classes up there. They're constantly being uploaded as we're doing class number 35 today. And all you need to do is just review those classes and write down the Hebrew word diaries. Maybe when we did it the first time, you weren't aware of how seriously we were going to take this. But now, take it as a project right now. And maybe by the time Yom Kippur comes around, you might be more familiar with the Hebrew letters, and you might be able to really do a grace after meals, or or the first paragraph of the Shema, or the blessings before food that we've already learned, to the point that you can understand them and you can really make them your own. You can own your Hebrew. You can own your own Hebrew. So today's word is like this. The word is Natan, N-T-N, or Nun, Taf, Nun. This is a very beautiful word. When we've learned how to read it, the meaning of the word is to give. We say in Hebrew, Misha noten mekabel, he who gives receives. It's based upon the principle of measure for measure, the way that God deals with us in this world, the way that God created this world. God instituted a nature into this world, which is a nature of reciprocity. We find it in the laws of chemistry as well. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. There's yin and yang, there's karma. There's different ways to refer to this principle of measure for measure. What you give is what you get, right? Mishen noten mekabel. He who gives receives, right? And we'll notice that this word Natan is fascinating as we go into a meditative level right now. The word Natan is actually a palindrome. It's a word which can be read both forwards and backwards. N-T-N, Nun, Taf, Nun. You can read it forwards or you can read it backwards. A palindrome is such a word. Like Anna, A-N-N-A, or Oxo, O-X-X-O. Many words like that are a palindrome. You read them forwards or you read them backwards. Now, what's the meaning behind the palindrome? What's the significance? What's the meditation? What's the depth behind the palindrome? The meaning is like this. Ordinarily, on a basic level, on a primitive level of interpretation, one would think that I am the giver and you are the receiver. For example, in this setting right now, I am the teacher and you are the student. Or if you are giving money to charity, then you are the giver and the charity is the recipient. It seems that we have very clear, defined roles. But in reality, the Torah tells us, Hebrew, the Holy Tongue tells us, that to give is a palindrome, because when you're giving, you're actually getting. It's a two-way street. The word is read both forward and backwards. Mi shen noten mekabel, he who gives receives. Why? Because of the nature that God invested infused into the creation of the universe. That the principle the world operates on is measure for measure, amongst other principles. Measure for measure. What you give is what you get. What you infuse is what you reap is what. No, you reap what you reap what you sow. Right. What that means is that when you give charity, instead of you depleting your principle, God promises to replenish your loss many times over, to the point that you become the recipient. You become the recipient. Why? Because God gave you more than you invested. We see this principle when you plant a seed. What happens when you plant an apple seed in the ground? Plant one little apple seed in the ground. What happens? The apple seed is seemingly the giver. But what happens is that you grow a tree which grows much, much more. In other words, like this. Let's put it this way. You think that the farmer is donating an apple to the earth. Think of it that way, right? What happens now is that the earth pays back the farmer by giving him many, many, many countless apples in the apple trees and orchards that are going to grow from this apple. Here you are, you think you're donating something to the ground, to the earth is giving you far back in return. Same principle applies to tzedakah. You gave $1,000 to tzedakah. God replenishes your loss many times over, just like an apple seed that was planted into the ground. God promises, test me in this regard. You're not allowed to test God in anything except for this matter, except for the matter of tzedakah, whether God will replenish your loss or not. Test me, says God. You give the charity and see if you will not be repaid many times over. In fact, you'll notice, we've learned this before, that the word for tithing in Hebrew, it's an obligation upon each and every one of us to give 10% minimum of our gross income. You're supposed to give 10% minimum of your gross income to tzedakah. You're supposed to give up to 20%. So the word for tithing in Hebrew, 10% tithe, is the same word as wealthy. Asir, ayin sin resh, is the same word as ayin shin resh, the only difference being the dot, the invisible dot on top of the shin. If the dot is on the left, it's asir, tithe. If the dot is on the right, it's ashir, which means wealthy. Because God is telling us, you give a tithe and I promise you I will make you wealthy. It's not easy to give a tithe, by the way. When you earn your paycheck, you're supposed to have a second bank account that you automatically, off the top, transfer 10% into this charitable account, your partnership with God account. And what you do is, by putting the money into that account, you now have put the ball into God's court. You say, listen, God, I've done my part. I put the money in the charitable account. Obviously, it's not enough to put it in the charitable account. You've got to disperse those funds now to charity, which is clear that when it's in that account, it's clear that all of those monies are going to charity. So what's happening is that you've now put the ball in God's court by saying, God, I've done my part. Now you've got to make me wealthy. Test God, I dare you. So that's what it means, the word Natan. You think that you're a giver by you giving the charity, by me teaching this class to you. I'm seemingly depleting of my principle, of my time. You're depleting of your wealth. I'm depleting from my wisdom, but in reality, it doesn't work that way. God says, you give, you'll receive much more in return. You'll become the receiver. I will become the receiver. In fact, in the words of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, one who teaches a fellow Jew Torah, his own mind becomes clearer 1,000 times more. That's what the Tzemach Tzedek says. Your own mind becomes 1,000 times clearer through teaching someone else, because you reap the rewards of being the recipient of the gift. I see that Rob Berger writes, his name is Yisrael ben Natan. His father's name is Nathan. And his granddaughter was named after his father, Netanya, like the city in Israel, Netanya, which is beautiful, beautiful concept, that it's about giving and getting. It's about understanding our place in creation in the universe. It's about understanding that everything we do is a test from God, and that God is testing us to see if we have the courage to give so that we can get so much more. And that's a beautiful, beautiful name there, Rob. Thank you for sharing that with us. Good morning, Adrian. I see that Chana Siegelstein is telling us, who is he and he is she, a bit of a tongue twister, which is correct. In Hebrew, who, Hey, Vav, Aleph, is he. And he, hey, yud aleph, is she. So it's a little confusing because in English he is he, so he is she. It's a little confusing, but without getting lost in that, let's not make that part of our Hebrew word diaries, because our point today is to simplify, not to complicate. But it is a bit of a tongue twister that who in Hebrew is he in English, and he in Hebrew is she in English. Anyways, nice point there, Chana. Thanks for sharing that. Anyways, back to our word. So let's understand a little bit deeper. What does this mean? Now that we have understood that the word Natan is a palindrome, let's get a little bit more deeper into it. So let's quote some of the biblical verses where you'll notice this word come up. When Leah names her sixth son, Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Her fifth son. When Leah names her fifth son, she says, Vatomer Leah, and Leah says, Natan Elokim schari. God has given Natan my reward, asher natati shifchati leishi, for me having given natati my maidservant to my husband. The story was that Leah gave her maidservant Bilhah as a wife to Jacob. Long story in Genesis. Vatikra shemo Yisachar, and therefore she named her son Yisachar, which means reaping the reward, claiming the payment. Yisachar. So we see over here in this context that the word she uses is God has given me my reward for me having given my maidservant as a wife to my husband. She basically allowed her maidservant to become a mother. By allowing her maidservant to become a mother, thus she was also granted the gift of motherhood. It's a little difficult to understand how that works. I mean, in today's world, we definitely cannot relate to this concept of allowing your husband to marry another woman, right? Somehow that being a good thing. But in biblical times, when polygamy was normal, that was fine, right? That was fine. So what she's saying is, by me giving my maidservant the gift of motherhood, I also was given the gift of motherhood. And we can totally understand that within this context of Natan being a palindrome. So just would like to know if on Facebook we're still live. Looks like my video seems like it's jammed. Are you able to still hear me on Facebook? Is YouTube still working? Friends on YouTube, please let me know if we're still on YouTube. Please let me know if we're still on Facebook. I don't know if you're still watching or not, or if the video cut out. I see that Sandy Boynton says, teachers learn from teaching, cannot teach unless you know. Beautiful. You cannot teach unless you know. But like the Talmud says, I've learned much from my students, more I have learned from my colleagues. Sorry, I've learned much from my teachers, more I've learned from my colleagues, but more than anyone, I've learned from my students. My students taught me more than anyone else. I'm glad. Thank you, Rob and Marty, telling me that we're loud and clear. And Adrian, nice to see you. Because my video just stopped playing. So I'm glad that you can still see me, but it says, sorry, we're having trouble playing this video. So I'm just gonna keep on talking. At least YouTube is still playing clearly. Anyways, so that was a beautiful example from Sandy Boynton of teaching, where when you teach, you learn, you understand the idea much more. I have to tell you, in my own experience, when I teach a class, I reach a deeper clarity than I would have ever reached without teaching it, because I'm giving it. By giving it, I'm getting. And that's the palindrome. That's the meditation here. Every time you see this word give, you now know that it is a palindrome. This is Rob's father. It's Rob's granddaughter. It's Nate Light. It's a beautiful name. It's a beautiful word. In English, G-I-V-E is not a big deal. Give. To G-I-V-E is you give, and that's it. It's over. But when you Natan something, when you Natan, in Hebrew, when you're Nathan, you know that you're dealing with a business exchange with God right now. You know that you're dealing with bracing yourself for great blessing. The more you give, the more you get the more a very, very powerful idea. It says also in Genesis, and Jacob gave to Esau bread and lentil soup. And he ate, and he drank, and he went up, and he left, and he abandoned, or he disgraced his birthright. If you remember the story, Esav comes back from the field from hunting. He was very hungry. It was the day that Abraham died. Their grandfather died. And Esav's very hungry. He asks Jacob, give me some of the food that you're cooking. And Jacob says, I'll give it to you only if you give me your birthright. If you make me the firstborn, Esau was firstborn, but only if you give me the right to the birthright, then I will give you the to eat this food. And apparently Esau disgraced his birthright by selling it for a pot of beans, and thus Yaakov legally becomes the firstborn, and thus merits later on to receive the great blessings from Isaac, their father. Another beautiful story. Once again, Jacob gave Esau the bread and the lentil soup that he was making. So there was again Yaakov Natan, and he gave. Another example from the Song of Songs: Mayim rabim lo yuchlu lechabes es ahava. Mighty waters will not be able to extinguish the love. Unahares lo yishtafuha, and rivers will not be able to wash it away. Im yitain ish et kol hon beisoi b'ahava. If a person gives all of the treasures of his house with love, boz yavozelo, he will be humiliated. It's a very powerful verse, this one, which refers to the fact that the fire of our soul will not be able to be extinguished by the great waters of distraction, the waters of financial distress, and all sorts of other anxieties in our lives. The devotion of our souls, the fire, always will remain intact. Okay, so these are imitain should call on base. So if a person gives all of the treasures of his house, he will disgrace himself. Basically, what this is referring to is that even if a person throws all of his being into his business, he's disgracing the essence of his soul. He's neglecting the essence of his soul. So yitain ish means to give. A person gives. Once again, you'll see this word coming over and over and over again. The word is natan. It means to give, and it's a very powerful and beautiful word for us to incorporate. Let's take a look at some of these applications in modern Hebrew. So we say at a funeral, and not just at a funeral, but any time that something happens to you, you can say the following. We've learned before, Gam Zulatova, the 3 words of this too is for the good. Everything that happens to you is for the good. Gam Zulatova, right? That's a nice thing to say, a powerful meditation when something bad happens to you. Say, Gam Zulatova, this too is for the good. But another thing that we say at a funeral, and we can often say when things happen to us, is Hashem Natan v'Hashem Lakach. God has given and God has taken away. God has given and God has taken away. Obviously, the word here is Natan. God has given and God has taken away, playing on that palindrome, that it's a different interpretation of the palindrome, that the same God that gives eventually will take it away. So don't get excited, don't get stressed out if God took away your gift. There's a beautiful and touching story in the Talmud of one of the wisest women in the Talmud. Her name was Bruria. She was the wife of Rabbi Meir. One day while Rabbi Meir was at shul, their 2 sons died. So she put them up in the attic because she couldn't bury them on Shabbos. Rabbi Meir comes home from shul and he asks, "Where's the boys?" And Bruria says, "Oh, they went out. They're busy. They're this, whatever. They're not available right now." And all day long, she's pushing him off. Where the boys are the boys, and she runs. That's the word. She runs, whatever. She avoids answering the question. So eventually, at the end of Shabbos, she tells him, "My husband, I have a question for you. Somebody loaned us something very, very important, or loaned me something very, very important. And now they want it back. What should I do?" So Rabbi Meir says, "My wife, I don't understand what the problem is. If somebody was kind enough to loan us something when they want it back, you give it back. You can't hold back something which is not yours just because you like it." So she says, "Oh, okay, my husband, let me show you something." She takes him up to the attic and she shows him the bed where the 2 boys are dead. And she says, "God gave us these 2 beautiful gifts. And now he wants them back. So I'm following your advice and I'm going to give them back." Can you imagine the profundity of wisdom, the extraordinary spiritual maturity that this woman exhibited in being able to relate to the death of her 2 sons, not only to control her own bereavement, but also to console her distraught husband with this extraordinary metaphor of God has given and God has taken away. The same God that gave us the boys, he asked for them back. So we're going to give them back. What an extraordinary perception. What an extraordinary approach to life and its challenges, which Bruria from the Talmud teaches us, the wife of Rabbi Meir. And that's what it is, Hashem Natan and Hashem Lakach. God has given and God has taken away. A very powerful word which I'd like to ask you to incorporate into your lexicon. God has given and God has taken away. If you lose some money, You say, no, the same God that gave it to me is the same God that took it away. God forbid, you should never have to say this about someone's life, but if an accident happens, or if something damage to your car, or I don't know, you get some unexpected bill, you can say, listen, the same God that gave me my wealth is taking back some of it. That's all. Hashem natan v'Hashem lakach. God has given and God has taken away. And when you meditate upon the palindrome, that it's forward and backward, you realize not only when I give, God gives me back, but also when God gives, he's also somewhat of an Indian giver, right? That the giving can also be taken back, and therefore it's okay. This is the way of the world. God gives and God takes, and that's what we say at a funeral to give ourselves some consolation. Mi yitain is an expression. Mi yitain is an expression which means if only. It means halavai. Halavai, which is a word you may be familiar with. It's a word which you may be familiar with, right? But I find that a lot of American Jews are familiar with that word halavai. Halavai means if only. And what it this word mi yitain, mi means who, yitain will give. Who will give? What we're really saying is, may it be so. May it be so. I think what we're saying is that I'm trying to work out how we apply this word. Mi yitain. I'm trying to understand the exact literal explanation of this phrase, of this idiom. Mi yitain, may it be so, if only. Who will give? I've always understood this to mean as a prayer to God. It's a prayer to God. You know, when somebody says, our daughter should get married this year, mi yitain, you'll say halavai, like if only. God should give. I think what it means is that God should give. Another interesting application of this word is business. You know how you say business in Hebrew? I'm dealing in business. What does it mean I'm dealing in business? How do you say business in Hebrew? You say masa umatan. When I deal in business, noseh v'noten. Noseh v'noten. Noseh means to carry and to give. Right? Noseh v'noten, it means back and forth, basically. Noseh v'noten means back and forth. Perfectly aligned with the theme of the meditation of the word, of the palindrome. Natan meaning back and forth. So business is back and forth. You know, you give a little, you give a little, you get a little, you make some money, you make a little profit, you lose a little bit. That's how business works. It's back and forth. Remember, when we go up to heaven, one of the first 3 questions that they ask us in heaven, number 1, they ask us is, the first question actually, the very first question that they ask us when you go to heaven is nasata venatata be'emuna. Nasata v'natata be'emunah, which means that you do business faithfully. That's the very first question that they ask you when you get to heaven. Can you imagine? How are you going to answer that question? Did you do business faithfully, which means that you charge interest to your fellow Jew? Did you give 10% to charity minimum, right? Did you work on Shabbos? Did you violate any of the laws of Torah? Did you eat in the treifa restaurant because you were trying to solicit the deal? Did you do business honestly and faithfully or not? That's the big question, right? So Rob says life is a zero-sum game. Is life really a zero-sum game? I don't think so. We don't enter this world to leave the same way.Maybe on a physical level, life is a zero-sum game, that you're born and you die without any assets. You don't have any luggage. There's no luggage packs on a coffin. There's no moving trucks behind a hearse. But spiritually, life is not a zero-sum game. We earn tremendous merit for our world to come, and we achieve by making this world a holy place, a home for God each and every single time that we do a mitzvah. So I'm not sure if I would agree with you, Rob, that life is a zero-sum game. I don't know. I'm not sure if I agree with you. Let me know what you think about that. Andy, is it worth the effort? So again, I disagree with you that life is a zero-sum game. And therefore it certainly is worth the effort. We were placed in this world. Well, look, the question is, what's your life purpose? If your life's purpose is to pay your bills, then I think life is pretty futile. What's the point? Why do you have to pay your bills? Just don't pay your bills. Kill yourself, die, and then, same thing. But if life is about love, if life is about growth, if life is about spiritual achievement, if life is about purpose, if life is about you doing for God what God could not do for himself, if life is about realizing how you're needed in the universe, how you have a unique mission to fulfill that no one else on planet Earth is able to fulfill, then it's certainly worth the effort drop. God needs you. You're unique. You're precious. God is waiting for you with bated breath to see if you're going to finish the mission for which you were sent to this world. Ayeka, where are you? God asks Adam and Eve and each and every one of us in our lives. Where are you today? Are you fulfilling the purpose which you were sent to this world or not? And he says, Lu Yehi is another way of saying, may it be so, mi'etain. It's another way of saying, may it be so. Beautiful. Mi'etain or Lu Yehi, both of them very similar concepts. Beautiful. Okay, good. So back to this application in modern Hebrew. So many words here. Wow. So many applications are put together. So business, again, is masao matan. You're doing business back and forth. Again, the zero-sum game is in business. At the end of the day, you probably come out with zero-sum game, where you've earned enough to pay your bills. And really, at the end of the day, what have you achieved? So if your life is all about business, then it's a pretty futile effort. To give someone a hand is latet yad. Natan yad, give me a hand. Ten yad, right? Natan yad, to give a hand, is natan yad, right? To give someone petch, in English, in Yiddish we say to give petch is to punish a child, is latet makot, to give someone makis, to give someone what's the word? To give someone how do you say it in English? To give someone a smack, I don't know, to smack a child, whatever, would be natan makot. Now, to give someone a green light is natan or yarok. To give someone a green light, we got the green light, we can proceed with the project. Natan or yarok, that's what it means, right? Natan or yarok is to get a green light, to give a green light. Or in very modern Hebrew, you can latet okay. Natan okay, which means okay. I think you need to translate that word. It's okay in English. Natan okay means to get an okay. If somebody gives you their word, Natan et hamilah shelo, he gave you his word. We also say in soccer in Hebrew, Natan gol. He gave a goal. He gave a goal, Natan gol. Or when you're driving a car and you want to accelerate, we say latet gaz, 10 gaz, give gas. Interesting, right? Give gas. Accelerate means go faster or slower. But what you're really doing when you're pushing that pedal is that you're adding petrol into the engine. So you're really adding gas. You're giving gas. And that's how you say it in Hebrew when you push on the accelerator. Latet gaz, ani noten gaz. I am giving gas, which means I'm going to go faster. When you divorce a woman, you give her a get, and that's called natan get. Latet get. In the Torah itself, I think it was last week, we read about how you divorce a woman according to Torah. You have to give her v'natan la sefer kritut, and you have to give her a book, a letter of divorce, a get, what's called. Now, when you give someone a hug, it's called latet chibuk. You give him a hug. Natan chibuk. Natan chibuk. To give a shoulder is natan katef. Just give me a quick second, guys. Somebody's at the door. I'll be right back. 1 second.
Good morning. Where's your meeting?
Just on the table here.
Right here?
Yeah. Okay. We're having a police luncheon here this morning. We're honoring the police here and saluting them for their service and protecting us. So we have a police luncheon that just arrived from the caterer, and we're going to be delivering that to the police a little bit later this morning. So we're just grateful for their protection. Michael, can you put in the Michael? Can you put in the big fridge?
Well, no, I don't know.
You don't know. Hey, don't worry. Thank you. Andy made a point here. Mass and energy is a zero-sum game, but life is for creating and achieving. Beautiful. So I think you agree with my point there. Anyways, this is great stuff. I think that this concludes my. Oh, and now I want to just tell you, there's one more name, which you may be familiar with. So we spoke about Netanya, the city in Israel, Netanel or Nathan, and there's also another name, Yehonatan or Jonathan. Yonatan. is the same word, Jonathan. If you know somebody by the name of Jonathan, then the name is Jonathan, which basically means God has given. It's a gift from God, right? That's what the name Jonathan means. God has given, as opposed to Nathan, which just means give. All the same exact word. And this is our word for today. It's word number 47. Friends, I urge and encourage you to look at this word. And when you see it, it comes up so many times in the Torah, so many times in the Torah. If you can just know how to read it, how to understand it, and how to meditate upon it, it's going to take you far. This is word number 47, friends. Don't be shy. Write down your Hebrew word diaries, put them on index cards, and let's make our Hebrew experience a whole new experience. Today is Thursday. Tonight, at 11:30 this morning, Corey is going to be giving a class on Hebrew reading and Psalms of King David. That's 11:30 on Zoom at jewishgardens.com/Zoom at 11:30 this morning. And tonight at 8 o'clock, I'm going to be giving a class on Mashiach. It's about Elijah, the harbinger of the redemption. Who is Elijah, and why does he need to announce the redemption? Is this a myth? Is it a fact or a fiction? What's up with Elijah coming before the redemption? What's going on over here that's happening tonight at 8 o'clock right here on Zoom, jewishgardens.com/Zoom. Thank you very much, everybody. Be safe. Have a great day. And thank you for joining me here today. Shalom.